An entire beach resort off limits to outsiders, mysterious military outposts on an artificial island, drone test sites in the desert, deadly bioweapon islands, and underground fortresses. These are places you'll never be allowed to visit. North Korea spent years hyping up the Wonsan Kama Beach Resort. When it finally opened back in July, Kim Jong-un called it one of the greatest successes of the year. The place is huge. North Korea says it can hold about 20,000 guests, and for a minute, it looked like they were ready to start cashing in on tourists. Domestic visitors got in first, then a small group of Russians showed up after a trip through Pyongyang. But just as it started gaining attention, the country's tourism website suddenly posted a notice saying the complex is temporarily not receiving foreign tourists. No explanation for why. The timing was interesting though, because Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov had just flown in to meet Kim and tour the place. According to analysts in Seoul, the ban might have been triggered by a Russian newspaper article describing the North Koreans at the resort as not really looking like actual vacationers. It almost looked like they were extras in a movie, placed there supposedly by the government. And knowing North Korea, it wouldn't be very surprising. But the shutdown can't last long. North Korea poured a ton of money into this resort, and apparently without foreign money coming in, they can't even break even. Next up is something the Russian government has never come out and admitted exists, but there's a very good chance that it does. Metro 2. If you've ever ridden the Moscow Metro, you might have been traveling directly above a completely separate, secret subway system that runs much deeper underground. The story goes that Stalin ordered it built as a secure evacuation and command network during wartime, and declassified Soviet archives and construction documents have actually shown evidence of deep tunnels and shafts connected to certain government buildings, so at least parts of this story are real. The layout is said to be 4 separate lines running over 165 feet deep, way deeper than the public metro. These lines supposedly connect the Kremlin, the Federal Security Service headquarters, and other important government buildings. There's too much evidence to dismiss completely, but not enough public information to know for sure how big it is or if it's still operational. It could be running right now though, moving politicians through secret stations while millions of regular people ride the public subway above. Over the past decade, China's been turning tiny reefs in the South China Sea into military outposts, but they didn't just build on pre-existing islands though. They dredged up sand and basically created whole chunks of land. Once the ground was solid, they started building stuff. Long runways, radar domes, helicopter pads, areas that look like missile launch sites. Then in 2016, they revealed a plan for an underwater base more than 10,000 feet down. Nobody really knows what that's about, but it sounds kinda cool. Some people think it might be a distraction from all the other construction above the surface, but that's just speculation. The whole area is being kept secret. Foreign planes get warnings to leave the airspace long before they can get close enough to see what's actually there, so almost everything about these bases is a mystery. There's this long runway sitting out in the Nevada desert, a fenced-off airstrip in what's known as Area 6, not too far from the more infamous Area 51. But what goes on here? Well, a spokesperson from the National Nuclear Security Administration said that both the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security use it, saying they go there to test their own sensors, which doesn't really tell you much. But buried in a big government document back in 2008 was a small note with a much better description of the place, saying, quote, "The purpose of this facility is to construct, operate, and test a variety of unmanned aerial vehicles, airframe modifications, sensor operation, and onboard computer development." So basically, it's a test site for drones. Satellite analysts say the hangars look big enough to hold around 15 MQ-9 Reaper drones, the same kind used overseas. And since the runway is too short for fighter jets, that lines up with what's going on, seemingly. Some have also noticed the terrain around the area looks a lot like parts of Libya, where the US watches militant groups. So if that's true, this place might be where they test those massive camera systems, made of hundreds of tiny lenses, the kind that can track people or vehicles from way up in the air. Kalua Iki is a crater inside Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. It looks calm from the rim. All the lava's cooled after a huge eruption, and in 1959, but the closer you get, it's easy to see why the park keeps people on the trails. The crater floor is officially off limits, mostly because of gas and the ground being unstable. The volcano constantly releases sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide, invisible, deadly gases that can knock you out in seconds. On top of that, the crust across the crater floor is thin in places, hiding pockets of heat underneath. So one wrong step and you could break through. Even when the volcano isn't erupting, the crater is very much active. You just can't see it. Trained scientists have gone in, but the public isn't allowed on the most dangerous parts for obvious reasons.
You won't just be banned from landing here, you're not even allowed to fly over it. Located in the remote waters of the Indian Ocean, Diego Garcia is one of the most secretive and strategic military bases on Earth. It's jointly operated by the United States and the United Kingdom, and it plays a major role in global surveillance, intelligence gathering, and military logistics. But its dark history goes even deeper. In the 1960s and 70s, the island's native Chagosian people were forcibly removed from their homeland to make way for the base, and many were never allowed to return. Since then, Diego Garcia has been shrouded in secrecy. The airspace above it is completely restricted, the waters around it are patrolled, and any unauthorized access by sea or air is considered a serious breach of international security. There's an island in Hawaii you're probably not allowed to step foot on, even if you're American. Niihau, often called the Forbidden Island, has remained isolated from the outside world for more than 150 years. Privately owned by the Robinson family since 1864, the island is a living time capsule. With no paved roads, no internet, no shops, and no modern infrastructure, it preserves a version of Hawaiian life that barely exists anywhere else. Only native Hawaiians who live there, invited guests, and a few government officials are allowed entry. Even the US military, which briefly used the island for training during World War II, has long since backed off. Attempts to open the island to tourism have repeatedly failed, and to this day it remains a place that even most Hawaiians will never see. This museum had to rethink everything after the most daring jewel heist in modern history. Housed inside the Royal Palace of Dresden, Germany, the Green Vault was once considered the most secure museum in Europe. It held priceless treasures including 18th century royal jewels, diamond-encrusted swords, and gold figurines. But in 2019, the impossible happened. Thieves broke in, disabled part of the security system, and stole over $120 million worth of jewels in a matter of minutes, most of which have never been recovered. Since that day, access to the Green Vault has changed dramatically. Security has been tightened to an almost militarized level, and many of the most valuable artifacts are now either off display or stored in areas completely closed to the public. What was once a showcase of opulence is now one of the most heavily guarded and restricted cultural sites in Europe. This royal tomb holds ancient secrets, but no one is allowed to disturb them. King Moonmu, the first emperor to unify the Korean peninsula, requested to be buried at sea when he died in 681 AD. His tomb is believed to lie beneath a rocky islet just off the coast of South Korea. According to legend, his spirit would transform into a dragon and protect the country from invaders. The tomb is sacred, and for over 1,000 years, no one has been allowed to excavate or explore it. Modern technology could uncover what's beneath, but cultural respect and religious tradition keep the site untouched. It's not protected by fences or armed guards, but by something even stronger: an unspoken pact not to disturb the emperor's eternal vigil. Some believe it's the most controversial burial site in the world. In the heart of Srinagar, India, the Rozabal shrine is an unassuming stone structure that's become the center of a global mystery. Some researchers claim the tomb inside belongs to Jesus Christ, suggesting he survived the crucifixion and lived out the rest of his life in Kashmir. It's a theory that challenges everything we think we know, and it's one that that many people, both religious and political, want buried. The Indian government has shut down access to the tomb, and the surrounding area is closely monitored. Even locals are discouraged from discussing its true identity. Whether it holds the remains of Christ or not, Rozabal remains one of the most politically and spiritually sensitive places on Earth. Even the people who live nearby rarely visit this haunted island. Rapa Iti, or Little Rapa, is a rugged volcanic island in French Polynesia, far removed from the world's usual travel routes. It's surrounded by sharp cliffs and unpredictable seas, making access extremely difficult. The island is covered in ancient stone fortresses and ruins, remnants of a once powerful society that vanished mysteriously. Local oral traditions tell of spirits that protected the land and punish outsiders who attempt to disturb it. While technically not illegal to visit, the island is spiritually taboo. Locals believe anyone who tries to explore the ruins without permission may suffer from illness, storms, or even vanish without explanation. It's less of a legal ban and more of a supernatural warning that no one really wants to test.
There's this massive wetland area on Kenya's coast called the Tana River Delta, and there's a section deep inside that basically nobody gets to see. But not because there's a fence or soldiers everywhere, it's the wildlife itself that keeps people out. There are hundreds of hippos and Nile crocodiles living here, and if you know anything about hippos, they kill more people in Africa than almost any other animal. They're insanely territorial and aggressive. The crocs are just as bad, but the real problem is the terrain. It's full of deep swamps everywhere that'll swallow you up, and because Mount Kenya is way upriver, when it rains up there, flash floods become a real danger. You can be standing somewhere that seems fine, and then suddenly there's just a wall of water rushing at you. So unless you're a scientist with very specific permits and probably a death wish, you're not getting anywhere near this area. Heard Island is in Australian territory, but it might as well be another planet. It is thousands of miles from any continent, sitting out in the Southern Ocean. Right in the middle of it is a volcano called Mawson Peak, and it's active. Australia has made the entire island a strict nature reserve, so it's already off limits, but even if it wasn't restricted, you would not want to go here. Under the ice cap and glaciers, the volcano has created this nightmare maze of lava tubes and caves. These aren't stable ancient caves though, they're constantly changing because the volcano is so lively. Inside these tunnels, you've got volcanic gases building up that'll instantly kill you. The ceilings collapse without warning because the glaciers above are melting from the heat below, and if you get near one of the vents where the heat is coming out, the temperature difference is so extreme you'd basically get steamed alive, so that sounds fun. The few scientists from the Australian Antarctic Division who are allowed near the active areas need very special equipment just to survive. And this one is also genuinely terrifying. Vozrosdenia Island used to be in the middle of the Aral Sea, but now it's connected to the mainland because the sea dried up. The Soviets called it Aralsk 7, and starting in 1954, they used it as a testing ground for biological weapons. They were testing anthrax, plague, smallpox, Q fever, tularemia, some of the worst diseases you could think of. And I mean, what could go wrong, right? Well, in the late 80s, when they were shutting the place down, they took huge amounts of anthrax spores, mixed them with some decontamination solution, and buried them in shallow pits. And then they left. When the Aral Sea dried up from all the irrigation projects, this island turned into a peninsula. So now this biological disaster zone is directly connected to the mainland. The US spent millions in the early 2000s helping to clean up the anthrax burial sites, but anthrax isn't even the worst part. There could still be weaponized smallpox in the soil and dust, and it's not regular smallpox. The Soviets were genetically modifying it to resist antibiotics. The contamination is so bad, it's now known as one of the most dangerous restricted areas on the planet. Everyone's heard of Cheyenne Mountain and NORAD, but most people don't understand what's actually there. This is not just, a military base carved into the rock. It's an entire city, sorta, built 2,000 feet inside, designed to survive the apocalypse. The entrance has these blast doors that weigh 25 tons each. Inside there are 15 separate buildings, and they're all sitting on giant springs. That's so if a nuclear bomb goes off, the buildings can absorb the shock. People think NORAD moved to Peterson Air Force Base and the operational stuff did, but the inner core of the mountain is still there. It has its own power plant, its own water supply, and air filtration systems to filter out chemicals and radiation. Only a small rotating crew of maintenance and training personnel ever see the inside. And of course, Russia has its own massive underground fortress too, and it might be way bigger. It's inside Mount Yamanto in the Ural Mountains. It's a closed town nearby called Mezhgorye that basically exists just to serve what's inside the mountain. Throughout the 90s, when Russia's economy was falling apart and they couldn't afford to pay their military half the time, US satellites kept watching massive construction projects happening at Yamanto during what was apparently an economic crisis. There are rumors that the complex could be big enough to hold 60,000 people. Some people believe it's connected to the Dead Hand system, which is Russia's automated nuclear retaliation network. Like if Moscow gets wiped out, this system automatically launches counterstrikes. The Russian government won't give a straight answer about what it is. They've said it's a mining site, then they said it's for food storage. Finally, the Ministry of Defense just said they don't inform foreign media about facilities built for national security.
Underneath a sleepy town in Normandy sits one of France's most closely guarded secrets. At first glance, Certainville looks like any quiet French coastal village, but beneath its surface lies a classified Cold War-era bunker that reportedly houses France's nuclear communication and emergency protocols. The Certainville Vault is rarely mentioned in public records, and its exact coordinates are unknown to most. Locals have reported heavy military traffic, strange antenna arrays, and secured compounds that are never explained. The government refuses to comment on its purpose. While there are no obvious barriers or signs, attempting to get close results in immediate confrontation with armed guards. It's a ghost facility, one whose presence is undeniable, but whose function remains completely hidden from public knowledge. Some parts of the desert are more than just sand, and this one is completely sealed off. Just outside the city of Ha'il in northern Saudi Arabia lies a vast stretch of desert that's officially restricted by the military. The area contains thousands of ancient rock carvings, some dating back over 10,000 years, as well as towering megaliths that hint at forgotten civilizations. But despite its cultural significance, the region is completely off limits to the public. Scholars believe the government may be hiding archaeological sites or possibly even modern facilities beneath the sands. Locals have shared stories of drones being shot down, cars being stopped at unmarked checkpoints, and mysterious lights appearing on the horizon. Whatever's out there, it's being kept under tight control. This is where America buried its radioactive shame, and it's leaking. During the Cold War, the US conducted 67 nuclear tests in the Marshall Islands, devastating both the land and the people. To contain the waste, the US military built the Runit Dome, a massive concrete cap over a crater left by a nuclear blast on Runit Island. Beneath the dome are tons of radioactive soil, debris, and weapon remnants. But here's the terrifying part. The dome is cracking. Rising sea levels and erosion have weakened the structure, and scientists now warn it could leak plutonium into the Pacific. The island is completely off limits, not just because of government policy, but because stepping foot on it could mean long-term radiation poisoning. It is a ticking time bomb sealed in concrete. Speaking of radiation poisoning, you can visit Chernobyl, but there's one part that's off limits, probably forever. While the Chernobyl exclusion zone in Ukraine has been opened to guided tours and researchers, Reactor 4, the exact site of the 1986 explosion, remains deeply restricted. The damaged core was initially encased in concrete, but over time it began to crack and leak radiation. In 2016, a new steel sarcophagus called the New Safe Confinement was slid over it, sealing off the most radioactive materials. Even scientists aren't allowed to enter without full hazmat suits, respirators, and special permissions. Radiation inside could still kill a person within minutes. For now, and possibly for centuries, Reactor 4 will remain sealed, quiet, and glowing with the consequences of mankind's biggest nuclear mistake. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Cradle of Humankind. Beneath South Africa's rugged landscape lies the Cradle of Humankind, a sprawling 47,000-hectare labyrinth of limestone caves just 50 kilometers northwest of Johannesburg that history seems desperate to keep secret. This World Heritage Site isn't your typical tourist stop. It is a forbidden vault of time where every cave and crevice hides relics from the dawn of humanity. At Bolt's Farm, early primates were first discovered, setting the stage for a series of jaw-dropping finds that would challenge everything we thought we knew about our origins. In the eerie depths of the Sterkfontein Caves, researchers unearthed Mrs. Plez, a 2.3 million year old fossil whose discovery reshaped the story of human evolution, while nearby, the Rising Star Cave system shocked the world with the unearthing of Homo naledi, a mysterious species whose deliberate burial of its dead hints at a level of ritualistic behavior once reserved for modern humans. With every fossil and stalactite, this hidden network whispers secrets of ancient lives and lost worlds. Next, we are talking about Pluto's Gate. The Plutonian at Hierapolis, also known as Pluto's Gate, is one of the most bizarre and forbidden places in history, tucked in a quiet corner of modern-day Turkey. Beneath the ruins of this ancient sanctuary lies a cave that spews toxic gases so potent that even the air itself is deadly. As early as the 2nd century BC, ancient worshippers believed this ominous site was the literal gateway to the underworld, where animals and even humans would be sacrificially thrown into the cavern only to be dragged out lifeless moments later. The gases here, still potent enough to suffocate birds today, were believed to be the breath of Pluto himself. Visitors could pay for a chance to witness animals' quick demise or to ask questions from Pluto's oracle. Yet the real draw wasn't just the spectacle, it was the mystical aura that priests, immune to the gas, cultivated around their supposed divine powers. These priests of Pluto deliberately entered the cave to prove their otherworldly protection, leaving a legacy of ritual deaths and eerie miracles. Closed off during the Christian era, the gate took on an even more forbidding charisma, its dark history igniting imaginations about the secrets it once guarded, secrets that remain locked behind its crumbling facade today. Next, we are talking about Kolmanskop. Kolmanskop stands as a striking relic of opulence and abandonment in Namibia's unforgiving Namib Desert. Once a booming diamond mining town built in the grand German style, it boasted everything from a hospital and ballroom to Africa's first tram and an X-ray station. Named after a transport driver who lost his ox wagon during a fierce sandstorm, this town thrived when diamonds were discovered in 1908, drawing settlers who even built private railways connecting Kolmanskop to nearby towns and even beyond. But as World War I depleted the diamond fields and a richer find emerged 260 kilometers to the south, the town's glitter faded, leaving its streets gradually swallowed by relentless sand. Today, the eerie beauty of crumbling Edwardian mansions and desert-engulfed homes attract intrepid explorers and photographers, though entering this once flourishing jewel of German Southwest Africa now requires a special permit due to its location in a restricted area. Next, we are talking about the Kola Peninsula military base. Deep in northern Russia, the Kola Peninsula is rapidly transforming into a high-stakes battleground that the world's superpowers are watching with bated breath. Here in the heart of one of Russia's most secretive and heavily fortified regions, new underground missile storage bunkers are being built at breakneck speed, each one an impenetrable fortress, shielded by layers of barbed wire and guarded by armed checkpoints. These hidden facilities, some of the most secure in the world, house Russia's most powerful nuclear and conventional weapons, including the feared Borai-class submarines and their deadly Bulava missiles. As the Northern Fleet readies its newest arsenal, it's not just about defending Russia's borders. The Kola Peninsula is at the center of a long-standing military strategy to control the Barents Sea, a move that directly impacts NATO countries like Norway with strategic missile threats and the looming possibility of military escalation. This is no ordinary military base. This is like a forbidden fortress, brimming with secrets and a constant reminder of the high tensions and fragile peace that define the Arctic's geopolitical landscape. Entering this realm isn't just a breach of territory, it's a potential spark for global conflict. And with Russia's expanding military presence, the Kola Peninsula remains one of the most strategically crucial yet hidden military sites shaping the future of global power. Next, we are talking about the Georgia Nuclear Aircraft Laboratory. Deep in the heart of Dawson Forest in Dawsonville, Georgia, a relic of Cold War secrets awaits discovery. A forgotten test site where the United States Air Force and Lockheed once dared to explore the unthinkable. At the Georgia Nuclear Aircraft Laboratory, also known as AFP number 67, scientists pushed the boundaries of possibility by experimenting with nuclear-powered aircraft and subjecting military equipment, and even the forest itself, to the harsh realities of nuclear radiation. Closed in 1971 and later deemed unsuitable for a new Atlanta airport, this eerie site still harbors classified mysteries with only concrete foundations marking where reactors and buildings once stood. The underground section remains accessible, but is now entirely flooded, save for a few shallow pockets, leaving behind a haunting reminder of a time when the very environment was a laboratory for nuclear warfare.
Right between Venice and Lido in Italy's Venetian lagoon is an island called Poveglia. Unless you're into plague pits, this probably isn't exactly a dream vacation spot. The island has a pretty dark history. Back in the 1700s, it was used to quarantine people with the plague. A lot of people, over 100,000, are believed to have died here. Then in the 20th century, someone had the bright idea to build a mental hospital there, right on top of where hundreds of thousands of lonely, sick people died of the plague. Yeah, that's the kind of environment you want to help manage your mental health. And not only was the setting bad, but patients, just like in so many of these types of hospitals at the time, were treated like crap. Things got so bad that patients began turning on the doctors, and one story goes that one jumped or was pushed from the bell tower. Today, what's left are rotting buildings. There aren't even any touristy ghost walks or anything. Even still, people say you can hear screaming coming from the island at night, and supposedly the soil is mixed with human ash. Deep in southern France is a cave filled with ancient paintings, and it's on this list, so no, you can't go inside. The Lascaux caves are famous for having some of the best prehistoric art ever found. They were discovered by a bunch of teenagers in 1940, and once word got out, tourists started pouring in, which, as you might guess, was a disaster for the paintings. The carbon dioxide and moisture from all the breathing and sweating, visitors started wrecking the walls. Mold even started growing. So by 1963, the French government shut it down. They built a replica nearby called Lascaux 2, which is basically a theme park version of the real thing. It looks close enough, but if you're into the idea of standing in the exact spot where some cave guy painted a deer 17,000 years ago, well, that's not happening, at least not here. If you're thinking of sneaking in to see the real thing, don't. There are cameras, guards, and very expensive fines, and honestly, the replica is close enough, plus you don't have to worry about breathing too hard and ruining 17,000-year-old art. So yeah, ancient art masterpiece, absolutely. Bucket list item, technically, but only if you're cool with the fake version. There's a town in Russia you can't go to. Not because it's dangerous or falling apart or anything like that, it's just off limits. It's called Mezhgorye, and it's one of Russia's closed towns. That means it's not even on most maps. You need very special permission just to get anywhere near it. But why is it closed off? What's actually going on here? Good luck getting a straight answer. Officially, it's there to support Mount Yamanto, where the Russian government may or may not have built a massive underground facility. But Mezhgorye is heavily guarded, so even if you do happen to find it, you're not just gonna stroll in. The only people who live here are military or work directly for the government, so trying to sneak in would be a really efficient way to get detained, or worse. Russia doesn't mess around with this kind of thing. Right in the East River between the Bronx and Rikers Island is North Brother Island. It's technically part of New York City, but unless you're a heron or a government researcher, you're not getting anywhere near it. Back in the day, this was home to Riverside Hospital, a place where they shipped off people with smallpox, typhoid, whatever other contagious diseases they didn't want spreading around the city. Not exactly a place you'd want to visit probably even now. The island's most famous resident, Typhoid Mary. She spent over 20 years there in forced quarantine. Eventually the hospital shut down and the island was abandoned. Nature took over and now the old buildings are crumbling, vines are everywhere, and it looks like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Pretty cool, but you can't go because it's now a protected bird sanctuary, home to a bunch of nesting herons and other wildlife. The NYC Parks Department keeps it sealed off. There's no tours, you can't go on a ghost hunt, there's no sneaking in for TikTok, at least not legally. So yeah, a forgotten hospital, a quarantined typhoid carrier, and a bunch of angry birds, all wrapped in a tiny island you're not allowed to step foot on. Very New York, very off limits. There's a place in Utah called Nutty Putty Cave. From the outside, it's just a hole in the ground near a cornfield, but underground, it's a maze of narrow passages. Explorers knew it was tight in spots, but people still went in all the time. I mean, it's an adventure. Well, on November 24th, 2009, a 26-year-old medical student named John Edward Jones decided to explore the cave with a group of friends. Now, John knew caves. He wasn't reckless. At one point though, they got to what looked like a small opening that dipped downward. A tight space, but they figured they could just wriggle through without trouble. However, this wasn't a normal squeeze. It was one of the most dangerous spots in the whole cave. John went in head first, and next thing anyone knew, he couldn't move. He was completely stuck. And just so you have a visual of how utterly terrifying his predicament was, here's a diagram. I don't think I can imagine a worse position to be stuck in. They tried to pull him back out. They tried ropes, they tried every grip maneuver they could think of, but the more they pulled, the more trapped he became. And hours passed. Rescuers were called, experienced cavers, search and rescue crews, even specialists from nearby states. They tried every technique to free him, but the rock just didn't give. The passage was too unforgiving. As night came, John's condition got worse. He couldn't move, he could barely breathe. I mean, he was upside down. Finally, he died. After a grueling multi-day effort, the decision was made to stop the rescue and recover his body later. Afterwards, Nutty Putty Cave was permanently closed, sealed up with concrete. This next story comes out of a village in West Sulawesi, Indonesia. In March 2017, a 25-year-old man named Akbar Salubiro left his home in the morning to go harvest palm oil, something he did all the time around the fields near his home, but when he didn't come back that night, his family started to get worried. By the next day, nobody had seen him, so people from the village went out looking. They found his palm oil tools scattered near the edge of the plantation and one of his boots out in the grass. Not far from where those things were found, they spotted a massive python, about 7 meters long, roughly 23 feet. It had a big bulge. The snake had swallowed Akbar whole. They caught it, brought it over to where his belongings were, and then used blades to cut the snake open. Inside, they found his body. Reticulated pythons are some of the longest snakes in the world. They can stretch their jaws way wider than you'd think, enough to swallow large prey, but a snake actually swallowing an adult man is extremely rare. They call it the Building of Death. In Tenerife, Spain, there's this massive abandoned hotel that was supposed to be a luxury resort back in the 70s, but at some point they lost funding and construction stopped. What was left behind is basically a hollow concrete shell with no windows, no railings, and wide open drops between floors. It's been sitting there for decades, fenced off but never fully secured, and it's become the kind of place teenagers and thrill seekers dare each other to sneak into. In December 2025, a young girl went inside with some friends. At some point near the upper levels, she lost her footing. being that the place is just an empty concrete shell, there are of course no barriers. So it was just a straight fall to the ground below. She didn't survive. And the worst part is, this wasn't some freak once-in-a-lifetime accident. The building has a reputation. There have been multiple deadly falls over the years. People have been asking for it to be demolished for decades, but it's still standing there. And people still go in to explore despite all the warnings. And Tenerife is also known for another dangerous spot. There's this breathtaking spot on the western coast of Tenerife called the Isla Cangrejos Natural Pool. It looks amazing in photos with bright blue water surrounded by volcanic rock, like something straight out of an Instagram post. When the Atlantic gets rough, waves can slam over the edge and sweep people straight out to sea. And that's exactly what happened in December of last year. Authorities had closed the pool days before because weather forecasts were warning of rough seas, and they put up fences and signs in Spanish, English, and German telling people to stay out. But despite all that, a group of people, mostly tourists, ignored the warnings. On December 7th, a powerful wave crashed through the pool and dragged everyone in the water out into the open ocean. 4 people died and another was missing. Since then, police have been cracking down on people who get into that area when it's closed, issuing 66 fines in less than a year to people caught trespassing there. In 1929, a huge landslide hit San Pedro, California, and several wooden homes slid straight into the ocean. At its worst, the ground was moving about 11 inches a day. The landslide swallowed houses, sidewalks, rail tracks, and the street itself. Homes that weren't destroyed were moved to other parts of town, and the remains were torn down. Today, the area is known as Sunken City. It's been posted as no trespassing for decades, but people still go here. Trespassers can be hit with fines and any cars are towed. The terrain is very unstable. The LA Fire Department has to rescue people from here almost every week. It is not a safe place to explore. This is the old Inunaki Tunnel in Japan. It was built in 1949. Over the years, it picked up a reputation. There were a lot of violent crimes here and a number of deaths. It got such a bad name that the tunnel was eventually closed off completely. And once that happened, the rumors about a village you can't enter started to spread. People began to tell stories of odd sounds coming from deep in the closed off tunnel. Then people started talking about Inunaki Village, hidden out in the woods, said to be this tiny village of only a few people who want nothing to do with the rest of Japan. Hostile, living by their own rules, snatching up anyone who wanders too close. One of the most well-known stories goes back to the early 70s. A couple's car had broken down on a back road, and while trying to find help, they ended up walking into what looked like some abandoned village. Everything was quiet until an older man stepped out of one of the houses. In the legend, he tells them they've reached Inunaki and then attacks them with a sickle. These are photos from Hashima Island, also known as Gunkajima or Battleship Island. It sits off the coast of Nagasaki. From the late 1800s until 1974, it was a coal mining town run by Mitsubishi. At its peak, thousands of miners and their families lived here. Concrete apartment blocks, a school, hospital, community hall. It was a condensed, self-contained city built right on a tiny island. But when coal became less valuable and the mines dried up, Mitsubishi shut everything down in 1974. Everyone left almost overnight. For decades, the island was off limits, but in 2009, parts of it were opened for tours, but there are still lots of buildings that are just too dangerous to explore. Next up is Nichitsu, which most people call Nichitsu Ghost Town. It sits deep in the mountains of Saitama, Japan. It used to be a tin mining town. The workers and their families lived right on site because the nearest cities were a long drive away. But sometime in the 80s, everyone left. There isn't one clear explanation for why. With mining towns, it's usually something practical, like the ore running out, the company shutting down, but there's no story of that happening. Whatever the reason though, the population dropped to zero and the buildings were just left as is. What people talk about the most now is the abandoned hospital, because that's where a lot of strange stories come from. All your typical ghostly fare, but there's also a doctor's office inside that still has actual medical specimens the staff never removed when the place closed, like preserved organs sitting in jars. There used to be a jar with a human human brain too, but somebody took that one home with them. The rest of the town is still standing. It's just very worn down. Old houses with their furniture still in place, classrooms with books on the shelves. The usual frozen in time feeling you get in abandoned towns. There aren't many photos taken on this island, and reading this sign becomes very clear why. Gruinard is a small, windy Scottish island about 1 kilometer off the mainland. During World War II, Britain used it to test biological weapons, specifically anthrax. They released the spores there and sheep were placed on the island. Just days after being exposed, the sheep got sick and died, surprise, surprise, proving the weapon was lethal. The government tried to contain it by burying or burning the infected animals, but the anthrax spores were not that easy to get rid of. Because of the contamination, Gruinard was quarantined for decades. In the 80s, activists calling themselves the Dark Harvest Commandos threatened to spread a bunch of contaminated soil unless the government cleaned it. So in response, scientists sprayed tons of diluted formaldehyde over the island and removed the worst topsoil. In 1990, it was officially declared the island was safe again, but people still don't really go here. Wonder why.
Next, we are talking about Black Mountain. Black Mountain is no ordinary rock formation in far north Queensland. It is a forbidden battleground where ancient clan wars and restless spirits have left their mark on towering, jet-black granite boulders. For local groups, this sacred land is steeped in legend, a place where epic battles once raged, from the last fatal clash between black and white cockatoos to mythic fights between giant brothers whose stone-throwing quarrels shaped the very landscape. Since the late 1800s, mysterious vanishings, couriers, cattlemen, and even police trackers have fueled eerie tales of people being swallowed by the mountain's dark forces. Elders warn that disrespecting the mountain is like meddling with a cursed Ouija board. One wrong step can leave you haunted by the same torment that once drove a headstrong visitor into a spiral of supernatural dread. Even geologist Gavin Deere, a man of science, confesses that at night, the wind whistling through these colossal boulders sounds like howling souls trapped in eternal limbo. This is a place where history, mystery, and myth collide, a mysterious frontier that challenges all who dare to tread its sacred ground without reverence. Next, we are talking about the Darien Gap. The Darien Gap is one of the most treacherous and mysterious stretches of land to cross on the planet. Spanning from southern Panama into northern Colombia, this brutal terrain is the missing link in the Pan-American Highway where the road ends and survival becomes a real challenge. Stretching over 100 miles of dense jungle, swamplands, and impassable mountains, the Darien is a lawless region that has claimed countless lives throughout history. It's an unforgiving place, flooded with rain, infested with deadly wildlife, and inhabited by criminal organizations that thrive in the lawless void. There are no roads, no guarantees, just the horrific stories of people who have ventured here seeking a new life, many of whom never make it. Aside from the complete lack of infrastructure, the air reeks of danger, where flash floods, poisonous snakes, and murky rivers pose constant threats. Adding to its eerie mystique, the Darien Gap is also home to indigenous tribes and remnants of ancient paths once used by both humans and wildlife moving between the continents. Despite the pervasive danger and the toll it takes on lives, both human and animal, it remains one of the ultimate forbidden frontiers, sitting unclaimed and untouched. Next, we are talking about La Cueva de los Teos. Deep in the shadowy jungles of Ecuador, hidden on the eastern slopes of the Andes, lies Cueva de los Teos, a labyrinthine cave system so steeped in forbidden lore that it reads like an Indiana Jones saga. Known as the Cave of the Oilbirds because of the native nocturnal Teos, this sprawling underground world features a jaw-dropping 65-meter deep shaft leading into 4.6 kilometers of winding passages and vast chambers. scars. Legends claim it houses a mysterious golden library filled with gleaming, hieroglyph-inscribed books allegedly left behind by lost civilizations or even extraterrestrial visitors. In 1976, one of the most ambitious expeditions ever, which even included former astronaut Neil Armstrong, scoured its depths and uncovered ancient burial sites dating back to 1500 BCE and meticulously carved passageways. Yet the fabled treasure trove remained elusive. Next up, we are talking about Kaho'olawe. Hidden beneath the radiant Hawaiian sun lies a forbidden island, scarred by war and shrouded in mystery. Kaho'olawe, this tiny, uninhabited volcanic outcrop just 11 kilometers southwest of Maui, spans less than 45 square miles, yet carries a weighty history. Once a sacred land revered as the physical embodiment of the sea god, this island's ancient stone platforms and petroglyphs whisper secrets of a time when native Hawaiians held it in deep spiritual regard. However, its beauty was marred when the US military transformed the island into a relentless bombing range during World War II and beyond, turning its dry, eroded red landscape into a haunting testament to modern warfare. The scars of thousands of explosions still mar its basaltic lava flows and hard-pan soil, a stark contrast to its former role as a peaceful, life-sustaining haven. In the 1970s, driven by a fierce cultural revival, activists staged daring landings to reclaim this desecrated land, igniting a movement that eventually led to the island's return to Hawaiian control. Now, it is designated as a cultural reserve. The island is off-limits to commercial development and is reserved solely for native cultural and spiritual purposes. And finally, to end off this list today, we are talking about the hidden chamber of Samarkand. Deep within the centuries-old walls of a forgotten madrasa in Samarkand lies a chamber that has ignited endless whispers and daring dreams. Rumor has it that this hidden room, known only to a select few locals and secretive scholarly circles, safeguards manuscripts and relics dating back to the era of Timur. Artifacts so powerful that they could upend our understanding of Central Asian history. The heavy, intricately carved doors of this chamber have remained locked to all but those deemed worthy, their mysterious contents passed down through hushed conversations and coded legends. As modern Samarkand bustles with life, the chamber stands as a silent, timeless mystery, its secrets fiercely guarded against the curious and uninvited. Every mention of this concealed trove adds another layer of allure, drawing historians, treasure seekers, and adventurers to wonder what lost wisdom lies hidden behind its sealed facade.
Heard Island and the nearby McDonald Islands are two of the most remote places on Earth. They're out in the Southern Ocean, about 2,500 miles southwest of Perth, Australia. Officially, they're part of Australian territory, though. They're home to one of the only active volcanoes in Australian territory, Big Ben, and the islands have barely been touched by humans. So they're pretty unique, and it sounds cool to visit, but you can't. These islands are very important from a scientific perspective. They're interested in how things develop here without human beings poking around, and on top of that, the conditions here are pretty extreme, so access to the islands is heavily restricted. There are no airstrips or harbors, and the journey takes weeks by boat through some pretty dangerous waters. Best bet is becoming an ecologist, which I very much do encourage you to get into if you're interested. Yes, you specifically. Other than that, there's satellite imagery. As for what does live here though, well, there's a lot of wildlife. There are seals, penguins, and rare bird species, but setting foot on these islands without authorization, illegal, dangerous, and nearly impossible. Niihau is known as the Forbidden Island of Hawaii, and it definitely lives up to the name, because it's very much forbidden. It's a privately owned island and tourists aren't allowed to step foot on it. The island has been owned by the Robinson family since 1864, and they've worked hard to keep it off limits to outsiders to preserve the traditional Hawaiian lifestyle of the few dozen natives who live here. You can catch a glimpse of it from other islands nearby or boats, but good luck actually seeing it up close. There are a few helicopter tours that can fly near the island, but they're not allowed to land. Because this place is so off limits though, people have started to wonder, could there be something else going on here? A hidden base, secret experiments. Well, probably not, but that's the internet for you. They just like to start rumors. To me though, the real story is interesting as it is. It's an island where people are living without modern technology. There's no gift shops, there's no McDonald's, and the owners and people who live there want to keep it that way. That's pretty cool. Diego Garcia is a small coral atoll in the Indian Ocean, part of the British Indian Ocean Territory. It's home to a major joint US and UK military base, so it's completely off limits to regular people. There aren't even any non-military settlements on the island. Diego Garcia is pretty controversial, not just because it's a restricted military base, but because of how it came to be. In the 60s and 70s, the natives who lived there were forcibly removed to make way for the base. To this day, many former islanders and their descendants are still fighting for the right to return. The United Nations even ruled that the UK should hand the territory back to Mauritius, but so far it hasn't happened. It's right out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and that's exactly why the US military loves it. From there, they can launch operations into the Middle East, Africa, and Asia without anyone watching too closely. So they're not about to give the place up. Plus, some people think there are other things going on here too, like secret prisons or surveillance stations. That's more plausible to me than weird stuff going on in the Hawaiian island. But again, if they don't want you there, you're not gonna see it. So, I mean, who knows? Room 39 is probably one of the most mysterious places on Earth, definitely within North Korea, which is saying a lot. Officially, it doesn't even exist. Unofficially though, it's believed to be the heart of the North Korean government's black money operations. So, counterfeiting, illegal arms deals, illicit substance trafficking, and cybercrime is all said to go on here. The room supposedly operates right under the noses of the elite, maybe even inside a government building in Pyongyang. Unless you're Kim Jong-un though, which I'm gonna assume you're not, then you're not getting anywhere near it. Even most North Koreans don't know much about Room 39. To be fair though, North Koreans aren't really told a whole lot about anything other than the propaganda they're allowed to consume. The place is so secretive that we're not even sure if it's a room, a department, a network of locations. That's how locked down it is. There are no pictures, no official mentions of it, just rumors and some possible leaked intel, but some say Room 39 could be behind some of the world's biggest cyber attacks. Good luck proving any of that though. There's one place you'll probably, hopefully, never visit in your life. It's Room 39. Surtsey Island didn't exist before 1963. Then one day a volcano off the southern coast of Iceland started erupting, and it just kept going for 4 years. By the time it was done in 1967, there was a brand new island sticking out of the sea. It's one of the youngest pieces of land on Earth. Barely anyone's ever been to it. That's not an accident. Surtsey's completely off limits unless you're a scientist with official clearance. They're trying to see how life will begin and evolve here when people just stay out of the way. Even tracking in a seed on your shoe could affect how things progress here, so they really don't want people showing up willy-nilly. Most of what we know about the island comes from studies and documentaries, so yeah, Surtsey's an interesting place, but you're not getting anywhere near it unless you're planning to dedicate your life to studying moss in Iceland in the cold. Good luck with that. Again, I do encourage you if you're interested though. Just off the coast of Brazil, there's a place you absolutely do not want to visit, Snake Island. Even if you're a snake fanatic, I think you'd be apprehensive about this place. Actually, maybe you'd be especially apprehensive being a snake fanatic because you'd know exactly how dangerous it is. All you really need to know about this place is that it's full of deadly snakes. A ridiculous number of them. Estimates say there's about 1 snake per square meter. Most of them are golden lanceheads, a type of viper that only lives here and nowhere else on Earth. Their venom can melt flesh. Literally, if one bites you, you're probably not making it back to the boat. But why exactly are there so many snakes here? Well, when sea levels rose thousands of years ago, the island got cut off from the mainland. The snakes adapted, mainly because they lost their predators, and eventually the place became a venomous nightmare paradise. So, unless you're a biologist who also has a death wish, Snake Island is not recommended. Just stick to the documentaries. What we're showing here are some of the only images ever taken inside Kumsusan Palace of the Sun in North Korea. This is the mausoleum where Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il are preserved preserved in glass coffins. As you can imagine, the whole place is under extremely tight control by the government, and forget about taking photos. Cameras are completely banned, so anything you see from inside is super rare. The few images that have leaked are mostly from the 90s and not the best quality. This creepy looking fence is known as the Gate of Hell, the only thing standing between the people of Hacienda Heights, California and whatever's hidden behind it, and story goes, it's not good. The property behind this fence has been abandoned for decades. Back in the 40s, there was supposedly a sanatorium here, and the rumor is it got shut down because of malpractice. But that's not the only story. Some say the building beyond the fence was home to Satan worshippers with all kinds of dark rituals happening behind closed doors. Gossip really took off because of the back entrance. A few people who snuck a peek claim to have seen pentagrams and cult symbols scrawled all over the walls, and if you catch a glimpse through the windows, some swear they've seen red stains on the floors. Nobody can say for sure. The fence definitely has a vibe about it. Makes you wonder if it's keeping people out or something in. This creepy looking place sits on an island called Ano Nuevo. You'll notice with a lot of these pictures, they're taken from the mainland. And that's because this island is completely off limits. This is a tiny island between San Francisco and Santa Cruz. It's one of the most important breeding spots for northern elephant seals and the endangered Steller's sea lions. And because there are so many seals and sea lions hanging out, great white sharks are often spotted in the waters nearby too. It's part of the Ano Nuevo State Reserve. The surrounding waters are included in 2 marine conservation areas. Geologically, the island hasn't always been an island. Back in the 1700s, it was actually part of the mainland, and over time, a channel formed and separated it. People cannot just visit here. Access is strictly limited to research teams approved by the University of California, which manages the island with the State Parks Department. There are a few abandoned buildings from the late 1800s, like a foghorn station and a residence and an old lighthouse tower that was knocked down because it was falling apart and threatening the wildlife. Some of the remaining buildings are still used for research, but other than that, the island is just completely off limits to the public. In the suburb of Downey in LA, there's a group of old buildings that have been abandoned for years. The sidewalks are cracked with weeds growing through them, and banana trees have grown as tall as the roofs. The windows and doors are all boarded up. This used to be the Los Alamos County Poor Farm. The farm opened in 1887. The county bought 124 acres to create a place for people who were poor, elderly, or disabled. Residents worked on the farm, growing fruits and vegetables, raising cows, pigs, and chickens. The food, of course, helped feed everyone, and any extra was then sold to make money. The first people moved in 1888, and Dr. Edwin Burdick, a doctor with a farming background, ran the place. Over time, the farm expanded. By 1910, it covered about 400 acres. Life wasn't always idyllic, though. Residents weren't always treated well, and there were plenty of cases of people taking their own lives. In 1915, a new superintendent, William Rudy Harriman, took over. He renamed the farm Hondo and started calling everyone patients instead of inmates. The number of people living there grew, reaching nearly 2,000 during the Great Depression. A tent city was added to accommodate everyone. In 1932, the focus shifted to medical care and rehabilitation, and the name changed to Rancho Los Amigos. By the 50s, it had become a full hospital, and the farming part was no longer used. The old buildings were abandoned in the 80s, and they've sat abandoned and off limits ever since. Morgan Island down in Beaufort County, South Carolina is a pretty unusual place. Most people know it by its nickname, Monkey Island, because it is home to a huge population of rhesus macaques. There are a few thousand of them there, freely roaming around. And how they get there? In the late 70s and early 80s, around 1,400 of them were moved there from a research center in Puerto Rico. Since then, the population has grown, and the island ended up becoming one of the largest colonies of rhesus macaques outside of their natural habitat. The island is owned by the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, but the monkey colony is managed by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Because of that, it isn't open to the public. You can go near it by boat, but nobody's allowed to actually step onto the island unless they're part of an authorized research team. And speaking of research, a portion of the monkeys, usually a few hundred a year, are captured and taken off the island to be used and labs. Yeah, sorry, had to be a dark side to this one too. In Mount Gambier, Australia, there's a sinkhole called the Shaft. From above, it looks harmless, but drop down, it opens into a series of underwater caves. On May 28, 1973, 8 divers showed up to explore. John Bockerman, Peter Burr, Glenn Millett, Stephen Millett, Christine Millett, Larry Reynolds, Gordon Roberts, and Robert Smith. A 9th member of the group, Joan Harper, decided not to dive, opting to stay topside. The day before, the team had explored part of the cave successfully, but this day, they decided to push even further into a tight tunnel that sloped away from the main chamber. At first, everything was fine. The water was clear, the limestone formations were just stunning, but as they went deeper, the tunnels narrowed and they lost visibility, partly from silt that had been stirred up from the cave floor. And that's when the lines that the divers had laid to guide them back got tangled. The divers started to lose track of each other and panic set in. John Bachman and Gordon Roberts were the first to get caught in a corner where the tunnel suddenly dropped. They tried to maneuver back, but there just wasn't room. Glenn Millett and Stephen Millett ran low on air as they twisted through the tunnel, desperate to find the guideline. Christine Millett was caught behind a pile of rocks, unable to turn around. 4 of the divers managed to find their way back to the surface, the others didn't. Rescue crews eventually recovered the bodies of John, Gordon, Glenn, and Stephen from the cave over the following months. In June 2022, 2 friends were driving through the rural Alberta when they pulled over to check out what looked like an abandoned property off the side of the road. There was an old farmhouse there. All the paint was faded, the windows were broken, it didn't look like anyone lived there. They were expecting to get some eerie pictures, but what they weren't expecting was for this to turn into one of the scariest moments of their lives. As they walked toward the house, they hadn't seen any signs or fences, there were no warnings that the place was occupied, but before they could get more than a few steps inside, they heard loud pops. Someone down the driveway had opened fire at them, multiple shots. One of the men was hit in the leg and went down screaming, the pain tearing through him as his buddy grabbed him and yelled to get back to the truck. The shots kept coming as they scrambled away. Luckily though, they both made it to the hospital and survived. RCMP later carried out a search warrant on the property and found a stash of 14 loaded firearms, including 8 that are normally not allowed without very strict licensing. A 59-year-old man who lived there was eventually arrested and charged, not just for the shooting, but for how he was storing and possessing those weapons. In Canada, you're not even allowed to stash your weapons loaded. You gotta store the bullets separately. A YouTuber got caught last year trying to step foot on North Sentinel Island. If you've watched the channel long enough, you know all about this tiny island in the Indian Ocean. The people who live there, the Sentinelese, have basically zero contact with the outside world and make it clear they don't want any. The Indian government enforces a ban that makes it illegal for anyone to go within 3 miles of the shoreline, but that didn't stop a 24-year-old American influencer named Mikhailo Viktorovich Polyakov from trying to make contact anyway. Polyakov showed up on March 29, 2025 with an inflatable boat, a coconut, and a can of Diet Coke, which he apparently thought would help make friends with the tribe. He spent about an hour on the beach, blowing a whistle, snapping photos, grabbing sand samples, and filming the whole thing, and then he left. 2 days later, he was arrested in the nearby town of Port Blair and taken into custody by Indian police. Investigators say it was his 3rd time trying to get to the island. Polyakov was charged, and as of the latest reports, he's still held and waiting for his court date. Off the coast of a popular Egyptian Red Sea resort, there's a tourist submarine that takes people underwater to look at coral reefs. On March 27, 2025, one of these rides turned into an utter nightmare. A submersible called the Sinbad, carrying about 50 people, sank less than a mile offshore. It was supposed to descend about 25 meters into the sea so people could watch the marine life through big viewing windows, but on that morning the vessel suddenly went down. Within minutes the submarine ended up on the seabed. The Egyptian Coast Guard and Navy rushed to the scene, pulling people out of the wreckage and hauling them ashore. They managed to pull 39 people to safety, but 6 Russian tourists didn't make it. In the Peak District of England, there's this underground cave system called Eldon Hole. On June 24th, 1959, 26-year-old Neil Moss and his friend Brian Shore headed down there to explore. They were solid cavers, not rookies, but Eldon Hole had a reputation. People respected it and feared it. Neil and Brian had been in the cave before, but this time they found a narrow passage leading down into a deep pit. It looked like a route worth checking out, so Neil went first. He managed to shimmy down the tight vertical squeeze, waist-deep feet braced against the rock. He disappeared from view, leaving Brian at the top holding the rope. And then nothing. Brian waited. A few minutes passed. Neil hadn't responded. Brian pulled up the rope a little to see what was going on and realized something was wrong. Neil's body was jammed in the passage, and he was wedged in tight. Rescuers showed up and worked through the night into the next day. They tried ropes, pulleys, wedges, everything they could, and nothing worked. The passage was just too small. They eventually made the gut-wrenching decision to cut him free, leaving his body in place and sealing the passage so that no one else would get trapped down there. In January 1925, a man named Floyd Collins went into Sand Cave, part of a limestone cave system near Mammoth Cave, Kentucky. Floyd wasn't some random hiker. He lived in the area, made a living exploring and guiding people through caves. He knew those underground passages like the back of his hand, or so he thought. He squeezed into a narrow side passage called Sand Cave's Sand Crawl. It was one of those skinny gaps that cavers poke into to see what's around the bend. But this time, something went horribly wrong. Floyd went in feet first, head down. His leg slipped into a small crevice. Before he could get himself turned around, he was stuck. His foot and hip were wedged. He couldn't move forward, he couldn't back out, and the more he struggled, the more jammed in he became. He had no radio, no rope, no way to call for help. His friends nearby heard his shouts and tried to pull him out, but the passage was just too tight. Every tug on his body only seemed to wedge him in deeper. As night fell, they went for help. Word spread and reporters showed up. Floyd became famous overnight, just not in the way anyone would ever hope for. For days, rescuers drilled holes. They tried every angle they could think of. They fed him food and water through tubes they dropped down. They even built a shelter over the entrance so that people could stay warm while they worked. But no matter what they tried, they just couldn't free him. Floyd, exhausted and trapped in that horrible position, slowly got weaker. After more than a week with no way to pull him out, the rescuers were out of options. Floyd Collins died right where he lay.